started. Before we start, could you all stand, please, and do the Pledge of Allegiance with us? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the 2020 JFC meeting of the Bristol Warren Regional School District. My name is Steve Kalenda and I will be chairman of this meeting. Before I get started, I'm just going to go around the table and have introductions. So we will start with the superintendent.
Hi, good evening, Jonathan Bryce, Superintendent of Schools. Thanks for being here.
Go ahead.
Diane,
Go right ahead.
sorry, Diane Santa, the Assistant Superintendent for the school district.
Tina Vogel, Chief Operating Officer for the school district.
Ryan Bradshaw, School Committee Treasurer.
Erin Schofield, Chairperson, Bristol Warren Regional School Committee.
Tony Teixeira, Bristol Town Council.
Mary Corella, Bristol Town Council.
Nathan Caluro, Bristol Town Council.
Carrie Cronin, Warren Town Council.
Aaron Lane, Bristol Town Council.
Tim Sweeney, Bristol Town Council.
Tamara Kaplan, Town of Warren taxpayer and a parent of 2 kids at KMS.
Steve Contenti, Bristol Town Administrator, parent.
So the individual for the folks that are not following this from the town of Warren is an appointment by the town council. We have the ability to put one of our citizens on, and that's how Tamara is here. I also see a few of my fellow legislators in the audience. I see fellow town councilman Brant Eckert. Brant, if you could stand up, please. Thank you very much. I thought I saw some school committee members, but you're coming. Oh, there you are. Thank you. Yeah, hiding in plain sight. Thank you, members of the school committee. We appreciate you being here. And I wanted to thank all the members from the Bristol Town Council and the Warren Town Council for making this meeting happen. It is a scheduling challenge at times. So before we go further into the business, the way this is going to go is we're going to do some housekeeping issues that we need to take care of first, and then we'll go into presentations by the superintendent. While the superintendent is doing his presentation, there may or may not be some comments. We're just going to hold them to the end. When it does come time for public comment, we do have a podium here. I will recognize whoever wants to come and speak before the committee. We're not going to put a time limit on you, but we will ask that you be concise and be to the point, meaning we want to talk about the issues that are brought up before the committee. This is not an opportunity for you to levy any grievances you may or may not have towards a member of the committee or the school itself. We're here to talk about the budget before the committee. Once the public comment is closed, we'll bring it back to the committee and we'll have some discussion before us. No action is going to be taken this evening, although the agenda does discuss discussion and action. The action is that we're entertaining or we're holding a public comment. Other than that, Dr. Bryce, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, sir. So again, good evening, and I would just like to thank everybody for coming out. This truly is democracy in action, an opportunity to see what pretty much amounts to the largest budget in each of the towns. And more importantly, it really is a focus on what are we going to do as a community for our young people. When we think about schools, we think about the importance of making sure that all of our young people not only develop the basic skills that they need, but they also develop those higher level skills which are going to help them to identify career interests, ultimately graduate from high school, and then move on into the career of their choice. It is a long and exhaustive process. I'd like to thank first the school committee members, our chair, all the members of the school committee for the support that they've provided. I'd like to thank all of my team, some of whom are here on the panel as well as in the room for all the work that they've done. And then finally, I'd like to thank the members of the Joint Finance Committee because I know that certainly this is among one of the most difficult jobs that you have, helping us to try to identify exactly what the budget is going to be. Having said that, I would be remiss if I did not make sure that everyone in the room understands that the budget request that we have submitted is a request that we have already taken some steps, what we call cost containment, steps to limit some of the budgetary requests that we would ask. We've taken that upon ourselves because we think before you go out and ask for money, it's important to make sure to the best of your ability that where you can trim, where you can do those types of things, you've done those. But ultimately, what we are requesting is an amount that will allow us to move forward with programming, with things that are going to help our young people to reach their full potential. And so with that, I hope that you will receive this presentation in the spirit that it's intended, one in which we are willing to work with both towns to reach a number. We think the number that we have provided is that number. And so let's begin. I think Steve, you might want to slide out. So just in terms of our presentation agenda, here are all the things that our presentation actually is going to cover, just a range of topics. It is important before we just start talking about what the dollar amount is, that everyone understands what we're using those dollars for, and so we'll explain that. We'll also talk about the budget process. So this is not something that was developed in isolation, but certainly it started with our school leaders looking at their budget and coming up with a number. They then shared that at the district office. We were able to engage in conversations. Once that happened, we then were able to have discussions with the school committee. We then also had a discussion with town leaders. Those discussions, of course, are preliminary, but they are intended to make sure that everyone in leadership understands the direction that we're moving in, with the full recognition that once we got here in public, we would have a full vetting of the decisions that we are thinking about making as it relates to the budget process, so that everyone is aware. And then, because this is democracy, we have the conversation in public, and so we're looking forward to that. So why is our focus on improving teaching and learning? I think, and so I was just at KMS today, and by the way, I see some students in the audience, so I am very, very pleased that our young people are coming out to participate in this process. It really is democratic. And so they should be involved in hearing and learning about how the money for schools is being allocated. And so I think that's important. So thanks, moms and dads, for bringing your kids out. But why is our focus on teaching and learning? Our focus on teaching and learning could really fall into two categories. There are people in education that believe in education for education's sake. I kind of call them educational elites. Right? They believe that education is just something where you're supposed to develop the level of learning, and once you develop that level of learning, everything is going to be perfect. And I'm kind of one of those, but I'm also a pragmatist. And here's the other thing that I realized, that when students spend 12 or 13 years with us, moms and dads want to know, what is my child going to be able to do when they graduate? Are they going to have a pathway, an opportunity to go after their career, to follow their dreams? And so that's why our focus has to be on improving the quality of teaching and learning in every classroom and every building. Having said that, as I walk around and I visit schools, do I think we have good schools? Absolutely. I believe that we have good schools. I don't believe that our schools are as good as they could be for the community that we have and for the investment that we are making. And so that's why we need to repurpose our efforts on improving teaching and learning. So this is information from Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce that just talks about what the future is going to look like. That about 20% of good jobs are going to be jobs that you can get having just graduated from high school. Another 24% are middle skills pathways, which means that you have some learning, some education post high school. You've gone to trade school, you have an associate's degree, you have potentially up to a bachelor's degree. And then the other is the bachelor's degree pathway. So how do you define a good job? So it's not my definition, right? The folks at this think tank define a good job is one that pays at least $35,000 for workers 25 to 44, and at least $44,000 for workers 45 to 64, right? And so it just also lists the median age. Why is this important? It is important because I think for too long in education, we have been focused on every student graduating from high school and going to college. We actually got that wrong. And we didn't get that wrong just here in Bristol. We had that wrong all over the country. There are multiple pathways for young people to develop skills, knowledge, and ability, to display those skills, knowledge, and ability, to earn a middle-class living wage, and that is something that we need to prepare. Now here's the problem. The problem is that historically, we have made certain people pick and choose whether or not they are going to be on a college track or they're going to be on what we used to call a vocational track. What we now see is that there is a merging of the two, and all graduates need to have the same basic skills. All graduates need to know math and be able to do math at high levels. All of our young people need to be able to write and to think critically and to read for comprehension. So those are skills that you need whether or not you're going to be an electrician or whether or not you're going to be a teacher, whether you're going to be a police officer or whether you're going to be a lawyer. And so our job is to make sure that all of our schools have that level of education, and once they have that level of education, to give them pathways so that they can pick and choose based on their interests, based on the things that they want to do, so that they can go after that. Well, okay, so maybe this is, right, so maybe this is the musings of the new superintendent. No, it's not really. So, right, this just talks about the different outcomes: high school graduate, some technical, college or training, 2 or 4 year degree. So, let's just talk about the different pathways in the news. I would be remiss, and hopefully people have seen it. If not, you can go to our website and pull up the articles, right? So, a new article just coming out talking about students getting hands-on experience with 21st technology in the Warrenton Gazette. There was an article in the Hartford Courant about Electric Boat. Electric Boat just got a $22 billion Defense Department contract to build Navy submarines. They're talking about adding 17,000 jobs. These are high-wage jobs where students would be welders and pipe fitters and electricians and painters and other things in that particular line of work. And by the way, folks, as adults, we need to also understand that our young people are not going to have one career for 30 or 40 years. They're going to have multiple careers. So where they start is absolutely not where they're going to end up. And so we should not be upset that they start out as an apprentice making $25, $30 an hour and end up owning their own company, because that's the type of progression they can be on. And there are a host of other articles. One of the articles that we found, the governor just announced a new commercial construction workforce initiative. So the article from the U.S. Bureau of Labor says that there are over 270,000, approximately 270,000 construction jobs. Oftentimes these jobs are high-wage skills, jobs for young people and for other people that have those particular backgrounds. And so this is not something that we should frown upon, but it is something that we absolutely need to prepare our young people. And one of the things that I heard repeatedly, why don't we bring back the housing program? Why don't we bring back the construction program? And so we're going to talk about it. We're going to bring it back, but we're not going to bring it back in the same way. And so we'll discuss that. So let's talk about where we are. And we use this with the caveat. Just like a student cannot be judged merely by a report card, you cannot also merely judge the quality of a school by a state ranking. All right? I have some trepidation about the state ranking, but it's the game that we're playing. It's the method that they are judging schools. Folks, we have the ability and the capacity to have all of our schools be top 5 and 5-year schools. But you can't get there unless we change some of the things that we're doing internally, as well as we are supported both through funding, both through how we use our time, both how we use other resources. And so that's why it's important to understand where we are. So what's top 5 and 5? Why does it matter? Why does it matter that I walked in and I think on the first time I met all the district staff, we talked about top 5 and 5. Why does it matter? Because we have the capacity. We have the young people who, I walk into our schools, our young people are in class, they are listening to teachers. They are doing what we ask them to do. I do not believe we are asking them to do enough. I believe that our schools can increase the academic demand while at the same time increasing academic support. So what does that look like, moms and dads? Here's what it looks like. It means that we should ask your young people to write more than they are currently writing. We should ask them to do higher level of math. We should ask them to read, instead of reading little snippets of literature, they are reading a wealth of literature. Some of it is the academic canon for those folks in academia, right? We want them to read really rich text, but we also want them to read for enjoyment and read for pleasure. And so there are other texts that they may choose to read. Those are the types of things that we want our young people to do. Well, how do we get there? We get there by changing some of the things that we're doing internally, and we'll talk about it. So top 5, the first thing, long term, over 5 years, what we need to do. Increase social emotional programming in the district. And that's not for some children. It's not for children that are having problems. It's for all children, all right? We all know that being a teenager is really difficult. Except now, because of social media, being an elementary school kid in some ways is just as challenging as it was to, in our day, to be a teenager. And so we need to make sure that we're giving our young people the tools so that they can make good choices. That's what social emotional learning is, and that's what we need to incorporate. There are a number of things that we want to do in terms of expanding alternative learning settings for some students, and why that is important. So if anybody in this room were to experience chest pain, we have first responders here. First responders would give aid, and they would get on the radio, they would call for an AMBO, the AMBO would show up, they would take that individual to the hospital. There really wouldn't be a discussion about whether or not that individual has health insurance or what kind of health insurance they have. It's the exact same thing when a young person walks into our district who lives here. Their parents are residents of either Bristol or Warren, and they walk in and they have unique needs. We don't get to say, well, you're going to be too expensive to educate, and as a result, we're not going to educate you. So what that means is there are absolutely some children who walk in that have social emotional needs, that have mental health needs, that have physical disabilities, that have cognitive disabilities, that we absolutely have to program for. And the program cost for those students is over and above the normal per pupil expenditure. We can't turn them away. Not only can we not turn them away, morally, we shouldn't think about turning them away. They're our kids. So some of the cost of educating those kids reach 6 figures? Absolutely. $100,000 or more, plus transportation costs, to educate students that have really high needs. And it is almost impossible to plan a budget because you don't know when one of those kiddos is going to show up, and we have to make sure that we can educate them, or we have to send them to an out-of-district placement. We also talk about, unfortunately, we live in a day and age where almost weekly there is some type of active shooter somewhere in the country. This was the first time in January on our PD days where we actually brought all of our staff in and we worked with our local law enforcement officers, thank you very much, right, to do an active shooter training with our staff. It was well received. It was scary, all right, to hear the sound of simulated gunfire and then to think through what you need to do to keep your students safe and you safe. That's what we were doing. But it also highlighted that there are some security flaws that we absolutely must fix in our buildings to make our buildings even more difficult for someone with ill intent to get in and to do harm. And we absolutely have to be committed to that. As I mentioned earlier, we talk about reflecting upon and improving teaching and learning in every classroom. It is about raising academic demand. But can I also tell you, it's about using the time that we have. So here's what I found. So at our middle school, we actually had a period of the day where during that period, students could go and they could receive enrichment if they were doing well in all their other classes, and in some cases, they would get acceleration if they weren't. It was not consistent from classroom to classroom, and as a result, it did not benefit the entire student population. So I went and had a conversation back in February at the faculty meeting, and we took an inventory from the faculty, and they kind of agreed maybe we can use that time a little differently. And so as a result, we are taking that time out of the schedule. We are adding that time to the core instructional program, which means that we're going to expand the core instructional program by about 25%, right? So that's real time devoted back to core instruction that is going to absolutely help our young people. But it does us no good if we add more time and we continue to teach the same way, if we continue to have the same curriculum. And so those are some of the things that we're going to do. We then talk about professional development, and all the staff in the district have heard me talk about PD all the time. PD, PD, PD. Why do we need it? Well, guess how we get better at our jobs? We get better at our jobs by getting feedback about what we're doing. We get better at our job by opening our door and having our neighbor that is right next door come over and take a look at what we're doing and give us some feedback. We get better by sitting in a session that is about our job, that is job embedded, that is meaningful, and then we go and we try what we've just learned in the classroom, and then we go back and we debrief and we share out. We can't do that without having a clear focus on professional development. That is how every profession gets better, whether they are auto mechanics, whether they are doctors, whether they are teachers. That's how people get better, and that's what we need to focus on. Here is, when we started earlier, we were talking about we got it wrong. Here's where we got it wrong. I absolutely, as a parent, as a teacher, as a superintendent, absolutely want my children to follow their dreams. But as a parent, because I am the parent, I'm going to try to steer them in a direction that I think is going to be more successful than one that is more risky or has a greater downside, right? So if one of my daughters comes to me and says, hey, I'm thinking about being a lawyer, I'm going to pat myself on the back and say, yeah, all right? Because guess what? I feel like being a lawyer, you got a better risk, a better chance of being successful. But if my daughter comes to me and says, I'm going to open my own business, all right, at 23, as a parent, what do? Right? You want to support your child. Here's where we got it wrong. We got it wrong by not having programs and pathways in our schools that would support all students, not just the ones that already knew they were on their way to a 2 or 4 year college. But we need to support every student, because just because you don't start out in college at 18 doesn't mean that you don't end up in college at 27. And so a couple of things. One, we already have 2 state-approved programs, engineering, business, marketing, and communication. They are state-approved programs, which mean if a student from another district wanted to come to Mount Hope, they could attend Mount Hope, and we would potentially get funding for that student. Why is that important? That is important because we're going to talk about enrollment decrease, and we're going to talk about choice in a moment. But enrollment decrease, so over time, our enrollment is decreasing. I met with a family, and I think they told me they had 4 or 5 kids, and so, but they were all like in middle school or high school. I think I asked them to have 1 more for us, right, to try to like help us increase enrollment. But we joke about it. But can I just say, the enrollment projection is that we're going to lose students. So that's a given. So we have to address that. In the same breath, we also potentially are going to lose students because they choose to go to other high schools that have programs that interest them, and the dollars and the funding for those students will go with them. Well, it's sort of a double whammy, and what that does is it will absolutely put us behind the 8 ball in terms of state funding. We want to maintain state funding, right? Because as we decrease state funding, those are more dollars that absolutely the town should have to step in and compensate because of the decrease in enrollment. All right, so we need to hold steady on enrollment and hopefully increase the number of students that want to transfer in so that state aid goes up. And if state aid goes up, that is $1 that the locals may not have to contribute. And so it's sort of the question of, do you put money in to begin with, or do you wait and put money in at the end? You're going to have to put money in either way. But if you put money in early, it actually might turn into a revenue generator, which is not something that schools have typically thought about. So we also talked about what are we going to do this year. So in the next school year, we are actually going to build out construction technology, right? So we're bringing, I heard it so many times, bring back the housing program, bring back the housing program. Okay, we're going to bring it back, all right? But it is going to be different. What's going to be different about it? Well, number one, we don't want to have to buy land, and we absolutely don't want to build a house and then worry about selling it. Those are 3 things that are too risky. So the question is, how do our young people get the benefits of a construction technology program? They get all the benefits, and we do not incur the risk as a school district. And that is what the staff here and Dr. DiBiase and Wayne and some other folks are working through. All right. Ultimately, we'll probably begin with sheds, building sheds, and move and progress to more complex construction items. Ultimately, the idea is mini houses, which would encompass everything from construction, carpentry, plumbing, and electrical. And so those are things that we're looking to do. But we want to, in order for this to really be a revenue generator, we have to get state approval. And so we're going to go through the state approval process in the upcoming year so that hopefully we can do full implementation a year out. We want to do the same with computer science and cybersecurity, right? There are a bunch of folks, we're by Electric Boat, we've got Blount Boats, there's the Naval War College. This is an area, we go north to Massachusetts, and there are a host of high-tech industries. We want our young people to have an opportunity to walk in the door once they graduate, and maybe even before, in an internship or an externship, and learn skills that are going to set them up for the first job in their career. Remember, this isn't about their entire career. It's their first job, and we want that first job to be meaningful. So remember, I said we were going to talk enrollment. So if you look at our enrollment projection through 2029 is that we are losing enrollment. It might go up a little bit a year and then it comes down, but overall we're losing enrollment. So the combination of losing enrollment and open choice for high school seats where the money follows the children means that we could suffer the double whammy of declining enrollment and then students leaving because there are no programs at the high school that really interest them or that the state will actually fund if other students want to come in. So then lastly, you can't be a great business, you can't be a great organization, you can't be a great school system, you cannot be top 5 and 5 without a couple of things. Number one, and we actually have it at the bottom, but it's operational excellence. So everyone is clearly aware of all of the things that we have been doing this past week to deal with the health issue. That really is an example of operational excellence. We didn't start on yesterday. We actually started having preliminary conversations last week. And when we met on Monday, we established a plan. And our staff was able to implement that plan and make sure that our schools are going to receive additional cleaning. That is the type of operational excellence that you should expect every single day for everything that we do. We need to get it right. And when we don't get it right, we need to say, we didn't get it right, we're going to do better. But that's the type of operational excellence that you should expect. But you should also expect, as a school system, that we are looking for ways to increase efficiency, right? We should not just continue to do things the way we've always done them. And by the way, folks, the way we've always done them is the way every school system has done things. So we are not in some ways different than what other schools have done, but it does mean that we need to look for a different strategy. And I think that's why the school committee decided to bring me in and to keep me around for a while so that we can really look for those efficiencies and those ideas of innovation. So let me just give you a couple that we're really thinking about. Looking at every school, looking at the staffing model in every school. Is it the right staffing model? Is it too rich for the number of students that it serves? Do we need to take that staff in one school and move it to a different school? Do we need to take staff in one grade and move it to a different grade? Those are all things that the school system should do every single year. What about the use of additional programming? Should we look for grants? So the school system does not have a grant writer. I actually think we need a grant writer. I actually think we need to find a grant writer, and we're close to Providence, we're close to Massachusetts, that we could find a grant writer, and you don't have to pay the grant writer. You say your compensation is going to be based on some percentage of the grants that you pull down for the school system, right? That's thinking about things just a little different. We need to look at technology. Our technology cost is something that we continue to look at. There have been a number of people sort of, I kind of have like people in both ears, people pro and con. So here's the con. People always say, well, you guys are spending too much money on technology. Okay. But here's what we're doing with that technology. So the reason why we spend money on technology is so that we actually don't have to continuously buy textbooks. Technology is being used to replace textbooks. So when a new edition or some new ad comes out for a program, they can download it and all of our kids get it. It can also be used as a writing instrument because our kids have to write. It can also be used as an instrument to connect students within the class, across the school, across the district, and into the wider world. And of course, we would do that with all of the safety precautions that we absolutely need. So my response to people that say technology is not the thing that we should do and we're spending too much money in it, I would say that we absolutely continue to look at technology, but technology is a tool that teachers use along with students to help learning take place. For people that say we love technology, we need more, I would say let's slow down. The best tool that we have in our schools are our classroom teachers, our paraprofessionals, and our administrators. So if I ever get forced into a situation where I have to make a choice between technology and the human beings that we are working with, I'm always going for our great staff. But I also think that we have a community that recognizes the interconnection between the two. You need great staff, but you also need the tools, give the staff the tools so that our young people can be successful. And then lastly, we are very interested, so let me say it publicly, we are very interested in a multitude of cost-sharing projects that we want to engage with both towns with, because we actually think, you know what, if we could find ways that we could share some services, it may save all organizations. It may save both towns, it may save the school system, and ultimately it saves the taxpayers dollars, right? And so if we can find some way to engage in those conversations and those projects, we think we're going to be good. So what we talked about previously are the long term. What are we doing long term, right? Everybody wants to know what's the plan. So that was the plan. What are we going to do in the next year to make it happen? Here are some of the things that we're going to do to make it happen. Increase observation frequency from teacher leaders and administrators. You have professional development. You have a great curriculum. Students are in class, they are learning. But if you don't monitor what happens, Jack Welch used to say, what gets monitored gets done. So we need to monitor the professional development and whether or not teachers are implementing what we have asked them to do and to learn. We talk about PD, we talk about social emotional programs, and also making sure that we've got really strong curricular alignment, pre-K to 12. I'm gonna skip, right? It's in your PowerPoint, you've got it, but this just is a further breakdown by grade level, sort of our focus on elementary, our focus at the middle school, and our focus at the high school. The one thing I will say that I am absolutely a fan of is making sure that all of our graduates know what they're going to do the day after they graduate. So let's play this out. So they graduate, they either have the graduation party that day or the next day, they work, they wake up, they're trying to, all right, so I graduated yesterday, life is good. But life is only good if you have a plan, right? What's your plan? What are you doing, right? Because I would think that it's a little scary to wake up the day after you graduated and not have a plan for what you want to do moving forward. And that's what we want to make sure that our young people have, a plan for moving forward. We gave you our current class size enrollment, our current enrollment and class size, just so that people can see in terms of what we're doing. All of these are within the mandated class size agreements in the collective bargaining agreement with our teachers union. And again, the question is, are staff staying with the particular grade, or are they moving when there is a bubble or things like that? And so those are all things that the school administrators working with the district will work through. We already talked about the decrease in enrollment, school choice, loss of revenue to the district. So let's start talking money. So we added this slide because we wanted people to understand where BWRSD ranks in terms of per pupil expenditure with neighboring districts, right? So the folks that we are often compared to, and it is not a apples to apples comparison, is Barrington. And we see Barrington down below at about 15,020, and we see Bristol Warren at 17,000. Here's what Barrington does not include. Barrington just built a brand new middle school, approximately $68 million, and the town is the entity that handles all of those capital costs. So that $68 million is not included in their per pupil expenditure. So when you look at our per pupil expenditure, one of the things that we deal with is we actually are the entity, the school board, the school committee is the entity that handles capital construction programs. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. We look at staffing. So remember, back in FY19, walking into the school year, this school year, there was a sizable reduction, a loss of about 19 positions. So we as a school system are a relatively small school system. Losing positions absolutely impacts our ability to deliver a high quality, great instructional program in every classroom every single day. It just does. And what people have been saying is, well, you guys have managed to make it. Yep. You know why schools manage to make it? Schools manage to make it because teachers and administrators absolutely work beyond the contractual relationship that they have, and they do great work for kids. But that is not the way that you build a high-performing, top 5 school system. When you cut staff, it hurts. It means that some classes may not be offered, some classes may not be offered as much. It means that students may not get the same level of support and interaction. And so our hope with this budget is that our projected staffing is the same next year as it is this year. All right? Here's our org chart, all right, which shows how we have reorganized the district so that it is streamlined, and ultimately we talk about operational excellence. When everybody was everywhere and the reporting lines were not clear, that is a problem, all right? And so by streamlining the organization, we are helping to make us more effective and efficient. As we start talking about dollars, what are some of the things that we needed to consider for our budget? So we needed to consider a loss of state aid. So for those of you that are writing or have a note, we are projected to lose approximately $409,000 in state aid this year. 2 reasons: loss of enrollment and a decrease in the number of families that have completed free and reduced price meal applications. We expect that there's going to be a healthcare premium increase for the contract that we have to negotiate with our teachers union. We have been told that that number is somewhere between 10 and 16%. We hope it settles at about 12, but we are still waiting for what that number is. But that is a number from our healthcare provider. We have contractual steps for certified staff. We have contractual steps for non-certified staff that have already been negotiated. They're in the contract. It's a non-negotiable. Possible contractual increases, that is something that will be a part of the upcoming negotiations. And then there are required expenditures that we had even before building the budget. It's important that everybody understands that what we asked for is not what we ultimately wanted. Our initial budget was $58,263,862. That was the original budget. We then undertook some review for inefficiencies and other things that we could potentially remove for a couple of reasons. Number one, we recognize that you cannot actually ask for every single thing that you need. You're not going to get it. It was a decision. And it was a decision that I talked about with the school committee. The school committee gave me a lot of really good feedback. All right? But ultimately, the decision came down to, we are going to try to make sure that we are containing costs wherever possible, so that we make the decisions rather than the JFC make the decision. Because if we make the decision, we know where to make the decision. It would be like me picking up the phone, calling the principal, and telling the principal, I need you to do X in a classroom with a teacher that I've never been in and I don't know anything about. So it was really our desire to make sure that we addressed it wherever possible. And that's what we did, to the tune of $1,165,000 in cost containment efforts, which left us with a budget request of $57,098,862, which is 3.985%, right? Right underneath the cap. I know people have seen the newspaper. I know what the quote is. I am going to say it again. We absolutely need that request. It is not something that, we are asking lightly. We recognize that every time we have to come here to the JFC, that we are asking for something. It means that the community has to pay a little bit more. But I would absolutely tell you that if you want great schools, if you want our young people who so richly deserve to have a great chance at developing their dreams, we've got to fund this. So here are some of the things in that cost containment. About $705,000 includes a reduction in substitutes, elimination of an external program, reduction in supplies and materials. $160,000 really focuses on some self-supporting activities. Remember, we talked about doing things differently. One of those things that we're going to do, I know that I've got a ton of folks in the audience that are sports fans, that are really supportive of our young people and band and other things. We need to take those dollars that are raised at the gate, right, and for admission, and use some of that to offset some of the cost of athletics. It's not something that has typically been done here, but I do believe it's being done in other places. And it's not gonna, we're probably never gonna get to a place where the athletic budget is fully supported, because that would mean that we were bringing in about $600,000 a year. That's the total athletic budget. But if we can offset that in any manner, that is something that we no longer have to pay for through operating, and those dollars can be redirected. That's what we're talking about, the smart use and the redirection of some of those dollars. We talk about use of fund balance, and there's been a lot of conversation about that, and so we have that in as a placeholder. So let me just tell you what makes me concerned. I think the school committee is concerned, and we should all be concerned about the use of fund balance. The district has been using fund balance for a number of years as a way to not ask the towns to increase their share, just because we know that the state has changed the funding formula and we lost $800 to $1 million each year. The fund balance, which at one time was very, very substantial, and is now down to about $4 million in multiple categories. 2% and 2%, we talk about emergency cash flow, right, for emergencies, right? So we need to keep about 2.2 million of that. Some of that is sitting in capital, right? So we probably only have about $1 million left in fund balance before we are going to, if we continue down this path, create a structural deficit. Once you create a structural deficit, you dig yourself a hole that you're not going to get out of unless you get a substantial increase in funding. So it is advisable not to use fund balance for these types of expenses, right? And so I have to put it out there. We cannot continue to use fund balance to balance the budget. It is going to create a situation that we're not going to be able to get out of. So where are we in terms of revenue? All right. So in terms of revenue, we actually are requesting an increase in the local contribution of $1,554,954. Let me turn to that page. Sorry, because that number is a little small to see. Right. And it's a total combined revenue from local town aid of $39,985,000. So let's go to the next page, which is a breakout for the two towns. So the percentage, the 13-year average, and by the way, we had to revise our initial submission to the JFC and allow me to be responsible. We didn't use the 13-year average, we used the 1-year average, so the percentages for the towns were wrong. And so we sent that first sheet that we sent, we actually had to revise it, and we resent that yesterday, and it's included in your packet. Bristol, 62.81%, their contribution would be 2804. Warren at 37.19%, their contribution would be 12,530 for a total of 40,575,000. So if we go back, it is actually that top number, the local town aid and the local town aid for education transfer. If you add them together, that is what you get. In terms of expenditures, the expenditures include the cost containment efforts that we've already discussed. And ultimately, the revenue and the expenditures are the same, coming in at the $57,098,862 number. I would be remiss if I didn't say that there were other things that we absolutely are interested in doing that would make a difference for our kids, that might help us to achieve top 5 and 5 faster. And so here are some of them. Creating a pre-K classroom in Bristol. We know that there are more pre-K students out there that would benefit from a pre-K education. And so that is something that has to be a consideration. A grant application came across my desk today. I know that RIDE is doing something for pre-K, so we are certainly going to explore that. But it may also require some additional dollars. And we need to figure out what the entrance criteria would be for that, because we certainly would think it would be income-based. Expand instrumental music training for elementary students. My personal favorite, I see Rob in the audience. Where's Rob, right? We talk about pathways and opportunities for young people, creating a referee umpire training program for high school students, right? And so this isn't something that you're going to do forever, but it might be something that you do during the summer. It's one of your summer jobs. You are refereeing or umpiring a sport. You're making $35, $40 a game. You do that, it puts some money in your pocket, and it's the thing that you do until you get to where you want to be. And so that is something that we want to do. We are reluctant to call it a pathway because the state won't give us money for it. But can I just tell you, I absolutely believe that thing right there is going to be something that young people are going to gravitate to. They're already interested in sports. If they're already interested in sports, they absolutely would love that. We talk about a summer professional development workshop for administrators and teacher leaders. I've already reached out to one of our principals to be in charge of that. I do need to follow up because we talked in February, so I do need to follow up on that. And then we've got a situation that we are working through options. And it is about adding a world language teacher in KMS. And here's why it matters. It matters because potentially we could either increase the number of sections of Spanish that are being taught, and it does allow some students to get to high school having completed Spanish 1, Spanish 2. So now when they walk into high school, they take Spanish 3 and 4, then they take AP. I will tell you, I am not a huge advocate of that. I kind of I'm concerned about students getting to high school and walking into Spanish 3. So I'm concerned about it. People are trying, my staff is trying to talk me into it. I've got parents that are trying to talk me into it. It's just one of those things that we've got to work through and figure out what the research tells us. But if we don't expand Spanish, adding another world language so that it gives students at the middle school another option is something that we're interested in. I propose Latin. The pushback from my team and from parents is that, well, it's a dead language, no one's gonna like it, right? But for those folks that are interested in SAT and ACT preparation, it is the root word. It is the root of the English language. And so there are opportunities there, but we could also think about other languages that might be in demand. So I just wanted you to know that while we undertook cost containment steps, there were other things that we left on the table that we are unable to do with this budget request, so that we could both make sure that we had our staff in place, make sure that we have programming in place, and we will go and try to find grants and other programming and other funding sources to accomplish this. With that, I am actually tired, so we'll take some water, and I'll take your questions.
Dr. Bryce, thank you very much on behalf of the committee. Once again, you came through with a very informative presentation. Folks, unfortunately, I failed to do some housekeeping. I just need to do some quick business among the committee as far as the acceptance of the minutes. The March 13th, 2019, the March 26th, 2019 minutes should have been emailed to every committee member. You actually have a hard copy in front of you. Is there any discussion on those minutes from our other meetings? Did anyone recognize or notice any mistakes in any of the minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Now, if we're following along on the agendas, it is now time for a discussion amongst the committee members. And if anyone has a question for Dr. Bryce, Tony, you're sitting in, yep, you're in position A, so I'm going to start with you first.
Thank you. Dr. Bryce, I have a question regarding the instructional, the last portion that you just discussed, that there would be sort of a wish list, so to speak. What would be the bottom number for all of those? How you calculate that?
So, 2 teachers at approximately salary and benefits, that puts us at 220. The training and the PD, we could probably do the training, the referee. I would say it's going to be 300,000, right? Because it's 2, right? 300,000 plus the cost of furniture for the classroom, right? So about 300,
325.
325.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else for him at this time, Tony?
Thank you.
How about Mary, do you have anything for the superintendent? Hey,
Not this moment, thank you.
Carrie?
No, I'm glad you did cover the explanation of the cost per pupil. That was going to be my question, asking, you know, why we are where we're at when a system to our north is able to accomplish things. And that's a huge difference that they're not including the cost of their units. So thank you for that.
Eric?
Dr. Bryce, thank you for your presentation. I think it was a great fresh look at the what we have going on here in the schools. There's a lot that I agree with. Our graduates need help with writing and math. They really form the basis for a lot of what they're going to do. I'm a professor at University of Rhode Island, and one of the fundamental transformations that I've noticed is that the professors that we're hiring today, they're their own computer programmers now. And so you can't do research nowadays without writing your own computer programs to analyze data and things like that. So these are the types of skills we have to make sure that our students are starting to learn before they leave the schools. I really like the idea with the CTE programs, creating those types of pathways. I know the governor had the Real Jobs Rhode Island program where it was a sector-based workforce development strategy where they identify these areas of need where there's a need for certain types of skills, because a lot of these businesses, they can't find the talent because what they're looking for, the employees, the prospective employees, do not have the skills. I guess one of the questions I do have is you were talking a little bit about the fund balance and everything like that. And I believe you said that fund balance was somewhere around, what was the figure?
Around 4 million.
4 million. How does that compare with maybe some of our peer institutions? Has there been a chance to look at that, or to get a sense of whether we're higher than most or lower than most?
So I actually don't have that information, but it is something that we can look into, and we'll get it to everyone in the JFC as well as our school committee.
I also had several emails from constituents, and one of my constituents had, there had been a change in the school schedule that had caused certain opportunities not to be offered anymore. And I believe it had something to do with an engineering opportunity after school and that kind of thing. Does your budget do anything to address those types of opportunities, making those types of things?
So, yeah, and so I think not having seen the email, but based on your description, it probably has something to do with our change in structure, moving from an 8-period day to the 7 period with the floating schedule. What I can tell you is, in keeping with our efforts at innovation, the conversations that Dr. DiBiase, Dr. Santa, and myself have had are around whether or not we could flex our schedules, flex our teacher schedules. And if we could flex the teacher schedules, which means some teachers would come in earlier, some would come in later, and if they come in earlier, we would then run a particular course for a small group of students early in the day or either after school. And what that would do for us is It would allow us to have that extra course. It would not cost us any extra money other than transportation costs, because we would have to provide transportation earlier. And that may be an innovative way of expanding course offerings within a schedule that is constrained by the number of minutes in the day. And so that's something that we're looking at. We haven't decided that we can do it, but we are at least discussing.
So is that something that you're discussing, whether that's something that you might be able to do or not? Is that something that might have to get hammered out through collective bargaining or something like that? With the
So I would think, I heard someone say yes, right? And so, and if not in the CBA, it would certainly probably have to be like a memorandum of agreement between the two, between the teachers union and us as well.
Okay, thanks. That's all the questions I have for you. Like I said, I just want to reiterate that I think that there is a lot to be excited about, and I think it was nice to have a fresh look at the whole entire project.
Thank you. And one other thing, over the last a couple of weeks, I've met with members of the Chamber of Commerce, spoken with them on the phone, attended a meeting where the governor was there, and also actually had private meetings with two business leaders of manufacturing organizations, manufacturing businesses in Bristol and Warren. And can I just tell you, they echo your comments about not being able to find as many candidates for jobs as they would like. And so there's a need there, and we should have our students prepared so they can fill that need.
Thank you. Tim, do you have anything?
Yes. Hi, Dr. Burris.
How you doing?
Great presentation. I just wanted to talk about the 5-year plan. I wanted to be sure that the teachers have emotional support they need. As you know, what happened at KMS, I want to be assured, and I think my colleagues want to be assured, we're not in any of those situations again. Does that budget definitely give them the support they need to sort of prevent these types of things from happening again? I know it's a unique situation.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one, the budget does have dollars in it to continue social emotional programming at KMS. I am pleased to report that KMS, and for those of you, I was at KMS almost every day for the first quarter, walking the halls, looking at classrooms, talking to students, doing lunch duty. And what I found is that our kids are great. So I just need everybody to understand that, and that we just needed to make sure that we had the things in place to support teachers so that, and clear directions for them so that they knew what my expectations are. And so it's a middle school. And what I always remind folks is, remember when you were in middle school or in junior high, sometimes kids do squirrely things, and when they do, that there are teachers and paraprofessionals and administrators there to have a conversation, redirect them, and get them back into class. But certainly we are not experiencing any of the things that we experienced in the past. And as a matter of fact, I just got data today that indicates that we have about 1,000 fewer instances of staff absences this year for the time period from the start of school till now than we did last year. And I think that is an indication that our teachers and our staff are feeling supported, feeling encouraged, and they're showing up every day. They know that if there's an issue, our administrators are going to be responsive, and if they're not, all they have to do is shoot me an email. I will email them right back. I will call them right back. I may even show up at their building at 7:30 in the morning and bring them in. Let's have a conversation. How can we solve this? Because this really is a team. And what I found is that our staff is really supportive of each other, but most importantly, of our students. And so, yep, and we're doing the same thing. Thank you. Continued support at Hugh Cole as well.
And just getting to the numbers, I think it's really important that we all understand if that 3.89% is not achieved, what would that do to the schools? What cuts would happen? I think it's very important for this JFC to know what ramifications it would have, so we come in and make sure that we're all successful. I think we're all in lockstep, you know.
Yeah, and so can I just tell you, as I was thinking about it, it was the question that I knew I was gonna get, right? What happens if we don't get that number? And so there really are two tacks, right? Here's what I'm gonna say. I think the entire district is guardedly optimistic that elected officials, whether it be the school committee, local town officials, town administrators, see the positive steps that we are taking. And this is sort of like wind in our sails, right? If we get those dollars, they are gonna allow us to do what we absolutely need to do for our young people. If we don't get those dollars, we are gonna have to go back to the drawing board to figure out what we're not gonna be able to do. And I can absolutely tell you that without those dollars, there will be programmatic and staffing discussions that will have to be held.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I had one final question in regards to the Fix Our Schools bond. It wasn't really talked about tonight. Is there any discussion on larger about any renovations of any buildings or using that bond or that's out there from the state?
Yeah.
Get our schools up to.
So I think two things. Number one, the district is going to let an RFP in the coming month and a half, where we are requesting, we're looking for an architectural / engineering firm with an educational specialist or associate that can look at all of our buildings, give us a update on their condition, and also help us to build a plan to determine if we need a new building, or any new buildings, specifically whether or not we need a new high school, right? And so typically from the start of conversations to design and all of those things, to get to the completion and opening is probably a 6 to 8 year process. So we expect to start that with the $150,000 grant that the state has provided, and that will be done begun in September, should be done in February of next year.
And I'm sorry, one more final question. As far as that placeholder for the fund balance, you said it's a $300,000 placeholder, so it's not included in the overall increase budget. It's just
No, actually it is. Yeah.
It is. Okay.
Yep.
Just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could I just follow up on that?
Yes, absolutely.
On the, something I wanted to ask you about was on the capital. So you have this plan, of letting the RFP out and really looking at the buildings. But in the meantime, you still have to keep the buildings maintained. And I didn't hear any reference, I think it was a good presentation, but I didn't hear any reference to a capital plan or your capital budget. Could you elaborate a little bit on
Yeah,
that?
so we actually are currently operating under a 5-year necessity of construction, and we will forward that to you because you asked. The necessity of construction does not expire until, I believe, July of 2022. And there are a number of projects that are on there. We've been in discussion with the facilities folks at RIDE, and part of the concern we had was there was a huge construction project in terms of installing cameras. But the issue isn't the cameras, the issue is the Wi-Fi, right? And so we are actually going through, the school committee just approved an E-rate submission that we accepted. With that submission, we are then going to lay the fiber. And then the only question is, where do we come up with the approximately $500,000 for the cameras so that we can put cameras in all of our school buildings or replace the cameras that currently exist. And so we will give you the necessity of construction. right, which expires in July of 2022. And it just shows all the projects. That is probably the only project that we're not going to be able to do, the cameras, and so that might be something that the local towns are having discussions with local law enforcement, because we've shared that information with them, and it's critical for them to have access in the event that something unfortunate would happen. So that's another thing that we can look for. And then back to the other question about the new necessity of construction, which is going to take a look at whether or not we need a high school. The last thing I would mention is that the current necessity of construction really was focused on the Jacobs report. And while we actually think that the new necessity of construction is going to be have much more architectural and engineering heft to it, it should be prized over the Jacobs report.
So do you have a capital plan? We just did ours last week, and that's why it's on online. A lot of departments are sending us back answers to the questions that we have. So you have a 5-year capital plan where you will list things like an order of importance, for example, or priority, that you move things up, say, so you can eliminate something for next year in the cameras, for example.
That's why we're bringing the architectural firm in to do it, as opposed to building the necessity of construction document, which is what RIDE goes by, based on the Jacobs plan, which doesn't give us the type of decision-making authority that we need, right? It just isn't as fundamentally sound as having an architect/engineering firm come in and say, yep, your building is good, it's going to last another 15, 20 years, or you really need to start considering a building. So that's why we're doing it. So we will have that once it's done. We don't have to pay for it. The state has provided that funding, and that's what we're going to use.
I'm still missing the one thing though, and maybe it's just in here, I'm just missing it, is the routine maintenance, the capital projects, the HVAC, the heating, the boiler, that stuff. Is that in there?
Yeah, so routine maintenance is included in the budget, but we have not separated it. We have not separated it out.
Anything else there? No, Tony, do you have a follow-up?
Just to follow up
Yeah,
very
go
quickly.
ahead.
You know, I spent 31 years in many of the days servicing the district, and any of those years was actually doing cafeteria duty. Miss it somewhat, believe it or not. With that being
You
said,
can always come back.
well, the last 6 years I was dean. But with that being said, the short period of time you've been with us, we certainly have a good assessment of the system-wide, and I really appreciate that very much. We obviously done quite a bit of work, but you touched up on something that I recall very well. We used to have a grant writer at one time, and I can tell you she was worth every penny. She did a great job. Unfortunately, we ended up pushing her out of the system. It was very unfortunate that happened. She ended up being the principal someplace else, but that's enough of that. But I certainly think to work in sort of a commission basis, on the grapevine, I think that's a wonderful pursuit, and I'm hoping to follow through with that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your 31 years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Tim, anything else? Thanks. Mara, do you have any questions for the superintendent?
I do. Thank you so much. I really appreciated this. I also think it was super comprehensive, and I definitely have a lot of reading to do. And I'm also one of those people that need to sort of dive a little bit in on my own, and then I'll come back and ask some more questions. But I'm curious, are we in a place where this
3.985.
3.985. Okay. So are we at a point that we are looking at 95, because of lower amounts over the past years, and if we're looking at, so I just want to see if we're thinking forward. If we're thinking forward and we're saying, what does that look like? Is 3.985 going to be next year as well? And are we, because I know that we've been underfunding for so long and there is a hole. And so what does that look like over time? That will we get to a place in 5 years where we can say, you can, the school board, or maybe there isn't, maybe the JFC looks differently, and it's at that point. And is there, are we, I don't want to kick the can down the road anymore. And so I just also want to know what it looks like in the future. So is it 3.985 every year for the next 5 years, or is it more? Is it, so that's kind of where my head is. I don't know if there's a question, there's not necessarily a question per se. It kind of is.
So even though it's not necessarily a question, what I would say is the budget request that is being presented is for this year only. Just like the question about the capital construction, where we are currently operating under a 5-year necessity of construction, but we are going to move to something new in about a year, I would argue that we will have more time to figure out and I wouldn't say it would be a 5-year forecast, but I think maybe a 2 or 3 year forecast might be of expenditures, because we can't forecast revenue, but we can sort of forecast what our expenses might look like once we get a new contract. But then the year after that, we're going to have another contract that's up, so we're going to have to sort of forecast that. We could probably forecast expenditures so that we would know sort of where we are. And I would hazard to guess that we're going to be upside down, like on a bad car loan, right? And the question for the school committee, the question for the JFC is whether or not we let the situation invert and get upside down, or we address it before it gets there, because that's going to be the issue, right? Because it is going to invert at some point. And once it does, I think the real question is to get over 2 or 3 years to prevent that from happening is probably cheaper on the front end than addressing it on the back end.
I would agree with you. I'd like to put that out. I also was curious about 2 other things. Why, and this is also just because I don't have knowledge of towns, so maybe some of my fellow JC members can also, why the buildings that the school department has are in our towns, and so why are there no capital plans of, why are the capital plans not together with the towns, and it's just on the schools? I think it's kind of an interesting thing if it is the capital expenditures are in the budget, in the operating budget. I see them as 2 different things in my brain, where you have an operating budget, it's your teachers, your this, your that, and then you have a capital budget, which is your buildings and whatnot. And so is there a way that the money, or we look at it differently, where the money is dispersed in a way, like the towns can support the capital funding of the buildings and the schools?
I am certainly going to let the towns answer that question.
Sorry, guys.
Really, isn't it because the regional district is set up as a separate entity?
Yes.
And that is the reason why you carry your own, you know, you do your own bonding, and you have all of your, fund balance and so forth. None of that comes back to us. The towns are individually, before there was a regional district, it wouldn't be the JC, it wouldn't be this really, the town council would be doing that. And the bond, all of the maintenance costs, the capital costs would be included in our capital budgets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. It's another interesting.
Yeah, because I suppose, what would Monmouth High School look like if you're sharing it with Warren, right? And it was just coming into the Bristol, we were accounting for it in our capital budget, right? Like, how would we divide up the cost of something like
Well,
that?
it's legislatively, by statute, it's the bonding, when we merge the districts together, it created a separate entity. And that's, why it makes a difference. So when you ask, if you don't mind, this is my view of it, I think I'm correct, is when you ask the question like, what does it look like as far as the fund balance with other districts? It would only be like 2 other districts in Rhode Island that would have this situation. So, because most of them don't carry it themselves.
And my other question is, do we have if we talk about the fund balance, do we have a line, and again, have to sort of deep dive into this, where we put operational funds every year? Like there's like a particular percentage that in our budget, that we say like 2% of our budget we put into an operational or a fund of sorts?
So are you talking about for maintenance, or are you talking about?
Maybe just for operational. Yeah, it could be maintenance, it could be, yeah.
So I think there are 2 things. One, for maintenance, we are bound by the new state law that requires us to make sure that we are spending at least, I think it's 1.5%, and I think next year it's going to be 2% of our budget on maintenance, just to make sure that we are not allowing our facilities to decay into a situation like they may have found in other districts. I think the other question is, at the end of the year, if there are any remaining dollars in operating that have not been encumbered, once the auditors have completed their annual audit, then the school committee, by policy, makes an amendment and decides to move those dollars to the enterprise fund for capital. And so that's what happens every year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
No, I'm good for right now, thanks.
Steve?
Thank you. I really have no questions. Thank you for being available during the week. I know I do much of this information in the past, so thank you for that. I would just like to mention that I do like your emphasis tonight on the teachers in the classroom, and I would also add the principals for the success of the district. That was a very good point, and I thank you for emphasizing that.
Thank you.
I'm just looking forward to moving forward.
You got it. Thank you.
So going last, a lot of the questions that I might have had gets answered by my fellow committee members, but I do have one that I would like to just touch upon real quickly. When you were doing your cost containment evaluation, you mentioned having a reduction in supplies and materials. Have you identified the supplies and materials, or is that just starting to be a little more streamlined?
So I wouldn't call it streamlined, but we are actually doing 2 things. Number one, and staff have really been very appreciative. Once we explain to them, typically what school systems do is they decide that they're either going to put a hiring freeze or a spending freeze in place. I've always thought that those things are disruptive. And so I didn't want to do that, but we wanted to very closely watch all of our spending. And so what we did was we said, you can spend what you think you need, but before you do that, we're going to make sure that we have at our warehouse a host of commonly used instructional supplies. So before you decide to go and purchase those, you need to check with the warehouse. If we've got it, just pull it from the warehouse, and that way we're not spending money because we already had it in supply. In the event that there's something that either we don't have at the warehouse or that is just completely different, you need to submit a requisition. You submit that requisition to your principal. And previously, it just would have gone through our system. What now happens is that our chief operating officer, our assistant sup, and myself actually are looking at all of those items, reviewing, asking questions, and in some cases, returning them to the school to ask for clarification or outright denying the request if we believe it's something that we either shouldn't buy or that we already have. And so once we were able to, and we had a huge meeting where we brought all the principals and their business secretaries together so that they would all understand, and we went through that process once or twice. I think people understood that we meant business in terms of doing everything in our power to control costs. Now, having said that, when someone says to me, and I'm in the class, and the art teacher says, I don't have clay, and if I don't have clay, we can't have a sculpture class, then we absolutely know that it's something that we need to fulfill, and we fulfill it. But this is about all of us, all school staff, being more conscientious as it relates to putting a request in. Let me just say, I love teachers. I'm a teacher, right? I love teachers. But can I just tell you something? We are hoarders, right? And so, sometimes instead of taking one box of pencils, we take two. Sometimes instead of taking one ream of paper, we take two, and we use the one and we keep the second because we know in the back of our mind there's going to come a day where there's no paper in the copiers. And by the way, folks, it does happen sometimes where you get to the copier, there's no paper, right? So it's not in any way that our staff is doing something wrong. What they are trying to do is make sure that when they need something, it's going to be there. Our job is to make sure centrally, and we've done a fairly good job, and we need to make sure that we continue that. Our job centrally is to make sure that the routine instructional supplies that they need are there and are available.
So what it sounds like to me is you're coming up with a better best practices plan that you're trying to implement and have everybody buy into it.
Oh, absolutely. And our staff are really good, and they're working with us.
A little follow-up on Tamara's question, because I was thinking along the same way, is we've got the number of 3.985 of your request, and I understand that the teachers are in a contract year ending this year, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it's difficult to project what the contractual obligations will be that attach to that contract, but we can forecast some of those figures. It's going to be a 3-year contract, I'm assuming, unless you decide to do a 1-year deal and then you're going to be back at the table another year from now, doing it all over again. Has there been any discussion with you and your financial team? That's kind of what Tamara's question was. Have you projected what next year could be with the forecasted expenditures going up, what you could project the contract could be with an increase if you use basically a 2% salary increase, 3%, you could go all the way up to 50%. Have you started to do any of that yet? You're not going to get 50%.
Right. I think it would be inappropriate to have a discussion in public when the conversation...
I'm just going to stop you right there for a second. Yeah. I'm asking you if you're just starting to think. We've got in front of us top 5. We've got top 5 and 5. Are we also thinking of where we're going to be? Because we're going to be here next year. And one of those, if we're having those conversations, then that's fine.
Yes.
Thank you. I won't hold your feet to the fire. Thank you. Does anybody else from the committee have any other questions for the superintendent before I move to the public? And before we end, we'll come back to the committee. Yes, sir, Dr.
Yeah, and so I just know, I see people leaving, I just want to take a moment and thank all of the staff in the district that have worked really hard to put this together. People spent time above and beyond to make this presentation happen, and so I just want to thank them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So at this point in time, I'm going to move to the public comment. And folks, I apologize. I did not introduce the individual to my left. If you're wondering who this young lady is here, who is working diligently, writing notes, her name is Rhonda Thornton. She's an employee of the town of Warren. She's one of our clerks. She's been my clerk when I was on the zoning board, and when I came into the chair of the JFC, I brought her alongside with me. She works very hard and tirelessly at trying to get all of the information out to the members, so thank you, Rhonda, for being here. So at this time, if there's anyone in the public who would like to come speak about what you've had presented to you this evening, just identify yourself by raising your hand or just moving towards the podium and you will be recognized. I know somebody wants to speak. Yes, please, stand up. Yep, go ahead, stand up. Yep. Yes. Good evening, and how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very well. So, a couple of housekeeping things. Speak loud and clear into the microphone. I'm going to ask you to identify yourself by your name and where you're from.
My name is Sarah Davis, and I'm from the town of Bristol.
And do you go to one of our schools?
I go to Kikamua Middle School.
Thank you for coming. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm an eighth going on ninth grader. I go to school at Kikamua Middle School like the others, meaning that I have lived this budget firsthand. And though the present school budget may seem like it's plenty big, I can tell you it needs some improvements. I was first informed about this meeting when I was talking with some friends in a carpool about choosing classes for high school. We were discussing what we wanted to do and how we could fit that in our schedules, and every time we thought we had found the perfect way to balance everything, we would realize that there simply aren't enough periods in the day to do so. As you know, there are four required classes for a freshman: math, science, English, and history, which leaves 2.5 credits for electives. If a student wants to go to college at any point in their life, it is strongly recommended that they have at least 2 years of foreign language. That drops the credits down to 1.5. You also probably know that the middle school boasts a very impressive band and a chorus. Students like me who want to continue band or chorus will find that after they select a foreign language and/or band and chorus, they have half a credit to work with, just half. We are told to experiment, join pathways, but with only half a credit to do so, it is a bit challenging. 8 periods would solve all of our problems. We started to question why we didn't have these 8 periods, and we found out soon enough: the budget. When I realized I couldn't do things because of the current state of the budget, I knew I had to speak up. After first learning about the budget, I started to notice things I hadn't before: the lack of scissors in math, the broken glue sticks in science, the missing music in chorus. Our teachers are trying their best with what they have. I'm not sure if I can count how many times a teacher has said to my class, I had to buy the supplies with my own money. Our teachers are so dedicated that they are paying their own money in order to give us a good education. Though we may just be in middle school right now, we are the future of Bristol and Warren. When we're grown up, we may be sitting in those very seats that you are sitting in as the new finance committee. However, when we're grown up, I hope we don't have to look back and say, if only. If only we had an 8-period schedule. If only our teachers didn't have to buy their own supplies. If only the budget had been bigger to actually accommodate the students of this district. Let's step back into the present, focus on the now. Because right now, the budget needs to grow. And I can tell you, as someone who lives and works within the budget, it needs to be bigger. We need a proper education. We are the future of our towns, and we deserve a fully funded, proper education. When you are making your decision, remember us. consider the future. Thank you.
Good evening. What is your name, please?
My name is Liam Reich. I am also from KMS in 8th grade, and I am also from Bristol.
The floor is yours.
Okay. I'd like to advocate for our students to fully fund the schools so that we can bring the 8-block schedule back and have more choice for students like me. Many students have no idea what they're going to do when they grow up. Having more electives means having more opportunities to do something that you wouldn't usually do. For example, I wanted to take on creative writing electives. However, because of the 7-block schedule, I was not able to do those things. We need opportunities to find our career because we aren't getting that now. I also believe the JFCs should fully fund their schools as a whole. This would increase the quality of our culture, education, materials, and readiness for jobs and college. We need a strong generation that will be prepared for the future. We need a good education and we need more funding. Some grown-ups are concerned about keeping taxes low. We must have our fair share. We must have our needs met too. If the schools are fully funded, we will receive a better education, including better materials, and including the state of our schools. Our bathrooms are falling apart. In classes, we're short on scissors, glue, and many other things. Without fully funded schools, our students will not have the materials to learn and grow. We need to change that.
Good evening. What is your name?
I'm Olivia Bullard. Sorry. Thank you. I'm from Bristol. I'm also in 8th grade at KMS.
The floor is yours.
Public schools are underfunded, put simply. I've been to incredible public schools that are funded and provided with the tools they need to give students an excellent education. We all know how important hand washing is. What are broken sinks with no hot water going to do for us? Broken heaters that go haywire, and extreme lack of supplies. What does lowering taxes for adults do for kids in schools that are unable to hire math teachers? The students of today are the working citizens of tomorrow. We've all heard the saying, and some brush it off, but it's true. Don't educate kids, we won't get jobs. Then who's going to build the community and help the economy? Who will be the doctors, lawyers, local business starters? If you don't give students the maximum opportunity for us to explore the different subjects during our education, we may never find a talent or a passion we could have unlocked. Most students in freshman year, even up to junior year, don't know where we're going to spend our lives. It is opening doors and not closing them that will give us the chance we need to try new things and even excel at them. Students don't have a future if we don't have an education that benefits us and shows us all the possibilities in life. Are you going to deny us opportunity, or are you going to help us the best way you can? Funding public schools. Education is an investment, not an expense. We, the students, are the future of our community, and we're asking you to invest in us. Thank you.